This episode of Budget MTG Decks is sponsored by TCG Player, the best place to buy your cards in the US. Welcome to Budget MTG Decks. All the cards you see in our videos are $1 or less, with exception of the Commander cards. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when a new video comes out. Hi, I'm David.
And I'm Ruud, and today we're going to talk about a fun and effective EDH deck you can build without breaking the bank. And today we have a counterspell commander in the form of Talrand Skysummoner. For 2 generic mana and 2 blue mana we have a legendary Merfolk Wizard, which is a 2/2 creature, and it states that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you can create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying.
Yeah, exactly. So the strategy of this deck might seem already pretty obvious. We're going to pop down Talrand as soon as possible. Then we're going to protect him with counter spells. We're going to play other instances of sorceries to flood the board with our nice little drakes, and then we're going to polymorph them into even bigger threats. So 3 things this deck wants to do: counter and bounce to disrupt and protect, play instants and sorceries to create drakes, and polymorph our drakes into obscene creatures. Now, this deck is also pretty affordable, right?
Yeah. The whole deck is below $27. We did the math on TCG Player market price, so you can really buy this deck for this amount of money. So it's affordable for anyone, I think.
Exactly. So now let's have a look at the synergy cards. We divided the synergy cards into 4 categories. Those cards that have synergy with instants and sorceries, those that have synergy with flyers, because we can make a lot of drakes, so they have flying. The cards that have synergy with tokens, obviously the tokens that Talrand makes, and cards that have synergy with the counter spells. This deck has tons and tons of counter spells. So let's have a look at the first category. That is going to have Elite Arcanist, Murmuring Mystic, and Sphinx Bone Wand in it. The first card allows us to exile a card onto it when we play it from our hand, and then we're going to be able to play that card every single time. It has to be an instant sorcery, but basically if we put a counter spell under this, it's nice because every single turn we're going to be able to essentially counter something for free with only having to pay the mana cost. Murmuring Mystic makes us an extra 1/1 flyer when playing our spell, so together with Talrand we're going to be making a 2/2 flyer and a 1/1 flyer, and Sphinx Bone Wand allows us to cumulatively keep on making more and more damage, dealing more and more damage to target creature or player every time we play instants or sorceries.
So we go on to the next synergy cards. Those are the flyers. We have Gravitational Shift, Archetype of Imagination, and Stormtide Leviathan. The first one makes our flyers bigger and the non-flyers of our opponents smaller. The second one gives all our creatures flying, and creatures of our opponents cannot have flying anymore. And the last one states that only creatures with flying or island wall can attack, especially with Archetype of Imagination. That's very strong, of course.
Absolutely. Then we have the cards that have synergy with the tokens, and that is Mass Polymorph and Synthetic Destiny. Essentially what both these cards do is they allow us to exile all the creatures we have, so all our tokens, probably also Talrand, but we're just going to exile all of them. Talrand goes to the command zone, no problem. And then for each one of those creatures that we exile, we're going to go through our library, and then we're going to put from our library onto the battlefield the first creatures that appear. So let's, for example, we have 6 creatures that we exile, so then we're going to go through our library until we get 6 creatures from our library and put them onto the battlefield directly. And we've got some huge threats, some massive bombs, like for example Archetype of Imagination and Stormtide Leviathan, but there's going to be even better stuff in there, so very nice.
Then we go into the synergy with counter spells. We have Arcane Laboratory and Guile. The first one states that every player can only play 1 spell per turn. So we can play counter spells in each of our opponent's turns, of course. Then we have Guile. Well, it's a big creature, but it also states that if you would counter a spell, instead you can play that spell without paying its mana cost. So that's really, really nice. It also goes back into your library when it's going into the graveyard.
Yeah, very nice. That is it for the synergy cards. Let's have a look at the protection cards.
So our protection cards in this case are actually all counter spells. We divided them in cheap counter spells that exile stuff, counter spells that also let us draw a card, and counter spells we could play for free without having any mana in our mana base. So the first 3 are Counterspell, Wizard's Retort, and Overwhelming Denial. You can basically all play them for 2 blue mana. Yeah, it's just counter spells.
Very simple, yeah. Then we have Abjure, Deprive, and Familiar's Ruse. Deprive and Familiar's Ruse, of course, also we can play them for 2 mana, but we do have to do something else, like return a creature or return a land back to our hand, but it doesn't matter if we're going to be protecting our commander. And Abjure, the first one, for a measly 1 blue, and remember that we have to sacrifice a blue permanent, but that doesn't really matter because we've got lots of Drake tokens, which are blue, so, that can just be gone.
Then we will go on to the Exile counterspells. The first 3 are Void, Shatter, Dissipate, and Fairy Trickery. It's all 3 mana, it counters the spell and also exiles the spell which it counters.
Yeah, which is nice against people who like to have graveyard strategies, for example. They won't be able to access that anymore. Then we have the cards that allow us to also draw a spell. We've got Arcane Denial, Dream Fracture, and Dismiss. All of those counterspell, and all of us allow us to draw a card as well.
Then we go on to the potentially free counterspells. We have Thwart, Foil, and Misdirection. The first one, you have to return 3 islands to their owner's hand. That's a lot, but it's really doable. Then we have the next one. You have to discard an island, and the last one, you have to exile a blue card from your hand to play it for free.
Yeah, with Foil, you also have to discard another card, so it's 2 cards you have to discard. And Misdirection is also not really a counter, but it doesn't matter because if somebody's using targeted removal against our commander, we can just change the target. So it's good as a counter spell. Anyway, that is it for the protection cards. Let's have a look at the control cards. We divided the control spells into those that allow us to deal with creatures, those that allow us to deal with other non-land permanents, and those that are just board wipes, which allow us to deal with all the creatures. We're going to start with the ones that deal with creatures. We've got Ovenize, Turn to Frog, and Polymorphous Jest. Now these are the cards being in the polymorph theme of this deck, allow us to turn a targeted creature into a 1/1 creature with no ability, so that's super nice when our opponent attacks us with something fat and they think, you got a Drake, so it doesn't matter. We can just block with our Drake and then bam, they're going to lose their creature. We don't, and Polymorphous Jest, of course, does that to the entire army of one of our opponents when they're attacking, and then if we've got a bunch of Drakes, they got a lot of big creatures, we block, and then they're all dead. It's great.
Then we have the next 3, Snap, Curse of the Swine, and Baral's Expertise. The first one returns something to our owner's hand, and we can untap 2 lands, so we still have them to counter something. Then with Curse of the Swine, we can exile multiple creatures and turn them into 2/2 boar creatures. And the last one can return 3 artifacts or creatures to the owner's hand, and additionally you can cast a spell which costs 4 or less from your hand for free.
Very flexible, that Baral's Expertise. Then we have some trade cards, and that is a Ledgermane and Switcheroo. Both of these cards allow us to take one of our Drakes and trade it for our opponent's best creature. What is important to remember is that even though when we have Talrand, when we play these cards, we will get a Drake, we cannot use that Drake to trade. So we need to have already a Drake on the battlefield to trade with our opponent's best thing when we play this spell.
Then we have the non-land control spells. We have Into the Royal and Blink of an Eye. For 2 mana, instant speed, we can return something to our owner's hand. And for 4 mana, we could also draw a card.
Yeah, pretty much you're always going to want to have it replace itself.
Yeah.
Then we have Echoing Truth, Aether Gale, and Tidespout Tyrant. Echoing Truth is really cool because it's kind of like a blink of an eye, but it also, if we use it to target, for example, tokens, it's also going to hit every other one of those tokens because it also hits all the cards with the same cards, all the permanents with the same name. So that's really nice against token players. Aether Gale just hits 6 things. That's just really great deal for 5 mana. And Tidespout Tyrant is going to be returning a permanent every time we play a spell. We're playing tons and tons of instant sorceries. All these cards would have low cost, playing tons of them, drawing cards, so we're going to be returning tons and tons of stuff. What is important to remember is that you can also hit lands because it hits any permanent, but don't be that person who starts targeting lands because that's just brutal.
Yeah. Then we have the board wipe control cards. We have Aether Spouts, Whelming Wave, Engulf the Shore, and Scourge of Fleets. The first one, for 5 mana instant speed, we can put each attacking creature on the top or bottom of our opponent's library. This is also card advantage. Then we have Whelming Wave. It returns everything to their owner's hands, but that's everything except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Then we have Engulf the Shore and Scourge of Fleets. They both do kind of the same, only they have another body. The first one is an instant. The last one is a creature, which could get in when you polymorph all your Drakes, of course, which is really, really powerful. Everything is gone, and you only have the 6 big creatures on the battlefield. What it does actually is you return to hand all creatures with toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control.
And we're playing tons and tons of islands, as you'll see, so that's always going to be pretty much everything. Important to remember, Whelming Wave, it does return all the creatures except for the Krakens, Leviathans, Octopus, and Serpents, and we do have a couple of those creatures, so there's a good chance that we might still have something really cool, like Scourge of Fleets, which is a Kraken. And what's also the difference between Engulf the Shore, it's an instant, so you can use it really well in our opponent's turns. And Scourge of Fleet, even though it does the same thing, it actually also, it only does it to our opponent's stuff. So it's really nice. It leaves our little drakes intact. That is it for the control cards. Let's have a look at the card advantage cards.
We divided the card advantage card into Draw, Dig, and Recursion. The first draw cards are Keep Watch, Fact or Fiction, and Future Sight. Keep Watch draws us a card for each attacking creature. Could be in our opponent's turn or in our turn when we attack with our drakes. Fact or Fiction reveals the top 5 cards of our library, and opponents divide them into 2 piles, and we choose one of those piles. And Future Sight is for 5 mana and enchantment, and we get to play with the top card of our library, which is revealed, of course.
Yeah, which is pretty nice actually, especially if we can just consistently play very cheap cards from the top of our library. We can keep a full hand right there. Then we have Bident of Thassa, Deep Fathom Skulker, and Windreader Sphinx. Essentially all these cards do the same thing. We're going to be attacking and dealing damage, or just attacking with our creatures, and as we're attacking with lots and lots of Drake Flyers, we're going to be drawing tons and tons of cards.
Then we go into the dig cards with Brainstorm, Opt, Impulse, and Anticipate. Basically they all let us look at a certain number of cards from the top of our library. We get to choose one, so some card selection.
Yeah, and of course we're going to make a little Drake for very little mana, which is pretty nice. Then we move on to the recursion cards, and that is Flood of Recollection, Call to Mind, and Archaeomancer. All these cards do the same thing. We play them, we get an instant or sorcery card back from the graveyard, back into the hand, so we can replay the best thing again.
So that is it for our card advantage cards. Let's go on to the ramp cards.
We didn't divide the ramp cards into any other category than just artifact based. We're playing mono or blue. We've got the first cards are Prismatic Lens, Star Compass, and Mind Stone. These 3 are all come in for 2 mana and allow us to tap for a colorless mana.
Then we have Everflowing Chalice, Worn Power Stone, and Hedron Archive. Well, they give us 2 mana, and Everflowing Chalice could give us even more, or 1 is also possible.
Yeah, if we put enough mana into it. That is it for the ramp cards. Let's have a look at the lands.
We divided the land cards into 34 islands and 4 non-basic lands. The non-basic lands are Lonely Sandbar, Remote Isle, Desert of the Mindful, and Blasted Landscape. Well, basically it's very simple. These lands can also be cycled if we have enough lands. So let's take a look at our starting hands.
So here we have 2 examples of starting hands. As you can see, what we like to have in our starting hands are basically a card that allows us to dig, so that either if we don't have enough lands or we don't have enough instant sorcerers, we can dig for that. We want to have a counter spell that we can use to protect our commander when it comes in onto the battlefield. We also like to have either some removal, or as you can see in the bottom hand, Arcane Elite Arcanist, which allows us to use our spells repeatedly. And in the top hand, you'll see a Synthetic Destiny, so something to polymorph, which is great. When we got those tokens out, we're able to turn those into the big fat threats that are in our deck. Or, like in the bottom hand, we've got Bident of Thassa, which allows us to really start digging and drawing cards so that we can get to the other good stuff. So those are some nice examples of starting hands. Now let's have a look at some non-budget upgrades.
So last but not least, we have some non-budget upgrades. These are just some suggestions you could use to improve the deck. Of course, you can go wild in all kinds of non-budget upgrades. We also have some suggestions of the cards you could replace with these non-budget upgrades. So just take a look. Thanks for watching. I'm Ruud.
And I'm David, and this was Budget MTG Decks. Find all the cards discussed in this video in the description below. Also, show you're a fan of the channel by rocking this awesome Budget MTG Decks merchandise. This show was made possible by the support of our loyal patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/budgetmtgdecks and donate as little as $1 per month.